What is up, everybody? It's Verta here, and thank you so much for stopping by. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a moment, but today I have a very interesting video which I've been working on for quite some time, and it's going to be a conversation piece which I wanted to have with you guys for a long period. And I want to know also your opinion on what the title is, because it means actually a lot to me. But please watch this video throughout the entirety of the end and then tell me what you think so that you can see where I'm coming from and how I'm approaching this. Above me today is the final day of the Content Creator Code event, so please do take advantage of this for my sake so that we can fund the little short story which I'm working on, because that's going to help a lot. I'll be posting more info about that in a bit. However, today's video, as the title suggests, is Deboreka, the accessory that broke Black Desert and everybody hated. So I wanted to approach this from a different perspective and to bridge lore and gameplay so that you guys understand why things happened the way they did, because people still are kind of like not okay with accepting over the fact that Black Desert is driven by a narrative, and the narrative itself translates into the gameplay. And we're seeing this, and this happens within every single game. It's not exclusive to BDO or other games. It's just simply how things operate. You need a narrative, and within those narratives you fit everything. So today, to properly explain how Deboreka happened, we got to talk a little bit about this place here, and we are at the peak of Ash Forest. However, this is the Kabuan mountain range. This entire thing over here is known as the Kabuan mountain range, and over here there's this little thing which is like a little bit of a tumble, one might say, down that leads towards a very prominent thing. This very prominent thing would be known as the Stars End Black Star Meteorite, and it would be a very, very important moment within Black Desert's entire gameplay, because Stars End is one of the most beloved spots in the entirety of the game. When Stars End fell when the meteorite fell, it actually first fell on top of the range. And as it fell, the impact itself was what drove the spirits of the Kamasil within the Ash Forest insane. We have a little bit of a thing here known as the Breath of the Dead. And it says the following: breath left by the ghost of Ash Forest. When the Black Star fell, a spirit from the Ash Forest was turned into the ghost of Ash Forest, and now only memories remain of the spirit it used to be. The Black Star Meteorite actually has a god inside known as the Godder-Eyed, who would mock the entirety of the zone by creating all of the monsters, and at the same time it would pretty much in a very perverse way totally reshape Ash Forest and all of the monsters inside. In the retaliation and what happened to the monsters, an accessory was born known as the Deboreka necklace, a necklace possessing a specter's hatred of all living things. Basically, the Ash Forest mobs, they were woken up from their slumber, this is the spirits, and they would see this thing malforming them, and they wanted to just simply extinguish everything around it, almost as if like to purge it themselves so that nothing would be able to proceed, almost as if to survive there. That is a theory, but the Ash Forest mobs, they simply want to get everything to die within that vicinity. And the Ash Forest in particular is a zone that is completely just nobody goes there. Very, very few people are seen inside Ash Forest. When the Deboreka accessory got released, something very controversial happened, and that is that, see, it was released at a time where nobody needed it. Nobody wanted it. It was something completely out of scope for everybody, because Stars End was released in July of 2019, and with it came the Black Star itself, which is the weapon, and it came with the Black Distortion earrings. Those two things would be essential towards the player base hitting the 273 bracket. The player base was actually pissed on so many levels with the Deboreka because it was on a spot which requirement was so ridiculous when it comes to AP. Not that many classes could grind it. People were only almost like a year later would start to figure out about Ash Forest's horrible accuracy on mobs, meaning that essentially Ash Forest would be the best place to be for evasion players. And through that, a meta around Ash Forest started developing with the evasion classes that could efficiently grind there. Was still too fresh for when Ash Forest was released. It was a carrot on a stick for nobody. There was no horse to put that carrot on a stick so that the horse would ride towards a direction. It would be almost a year after Ash Forest release when one of the first Deborekas on pen would be recorded, simply because it was absurd where this was. And one of the things which also was met is the way the enhancing of the Deboreka accessory went through for the player base. The Tet levels were worse than the Ogres, but the Pen were the best. You would have to grind 10 hours to get one Spectre drop or one entire Deboreka, whatever it was. It was far too much as a commitment in order for you to justify how long you would have to go there. The pricing of the Cron Stones at the time, horrible. It was just simply something absurd beyond comprehension. And not just that, typically in Black Desert's mythos and the lore, things are accredited to something whenever you have them. You have Khafre stones, which are, about Khafres. You would have, the Kuturan's left lung, which is the divine tree of Kuturan. You would have Kahel's artifact. This is in the future, however. Kahel's artifact, which is about the witch Kahel of Mountain of Eternal Winter. All of those things, you would have that. You would have those bits. But however, the Deboreka was tied to nothing. So, on a gameplay perspective, the Deboreka was simply, what the hell is this even for the time where you release it? And from a lore perspective, from the mythos, from the setting of the game, who the hell is this? What is this? It doesn't belong to anybody, right? It was something absolutely enigmatic to figure out. It would be years later, 5 years later, we would get a hint of who Deboreka might be. And through those years, Pearl Abyss would start to kind of almost as if mock us with Deboreka. The Deboreka was just simply out of place. Everybody understood it, lore understood it, gameplay understood it, and people kind of ignored Deboreka for a long period of time. But the important thing about it was that it's a goal that's absurdly hard to reach, and that actually stimulates people to go for it. Let's move forward to talk about how in the future the Deboreka would start evolving. See, the specters, the Ash Forest mobs that wanted to kill everything, they're just born through hatred and they want to extinguish all life in that vicinity. They just want to be left alone. The Ash Forest spirits were not alone in that train of thought. The next Deboreka accessory would be released as a belt, and the belt of the Deboreka would be in the Crypt of Resting Thoughts, a spot which almost for half a year, or in fact a year, stood completely empty. Nobody grinded it because it was the hardest spot in the game. I think personally, historically, the hardest spot in the game, considering the current gear level and also the fact that it had no drops at the time. It didn't have the Deboreka belts. It didn't have limbos. It was the hardest thing to grind. And I remember watching a video of Biohack, and he was basically dying with a few hits. We're talking about like 3 hits landed, he is dead. It was absurd as a spot, and Pearl Abyss would follow the very same thing, an absurd spot with an absurdly hard accessory to get, and of course we're talking about the Deboreka belt. It would be afterwards when the earring and rings would be released, and the earring would be like in Land of the Morning Light in some way, we don't even know why, and then the Dekiel Lantern would actually translate that into Valencia spots, Dekiel Olens, etc, etc, etc. The rings, however, were a little bit of a shift away from that, because Pearl Abyss did indeed respond to the necessity of detouring of Deboreka, because Deborekas were historically on spots which were bad. You didn't go to Ash Forest for money, you didn't go to Crypt for money. Later down the line you would, but at the time where this was happening, you simply wouldn't. And the rest of the accessories took a little bit of a detour because there would be a random reward through top tier activity, which was better than what it used to be, but the players were still not happy with how RNG it was and how some people on day 1 got a Pen Deboreka ring because they got 3 limbos, and from the 3 limbos they just one-tapped everything. They got like 3-4 Deborekas per limbo. You get the entire idea. The RNG of it was absurd. This happened both for the earring and this happened both for the ring as well. So now this is like how the gameplay arc went, and for the lore bit, we still didn't know who Deboreka was. There were a few connections here and there that would matter, and one of them was the Khafre's journal, who would explain a little bit more about, not for Deboreka itself, but the context around it, where he would travel. And a little bit of a thing was noticed. Deborekas went onto the path of hatred and evil, and everywhere where Khafre's was, Deborekas would eventually come and sprout. So people thought in the beginning that Deboreka had something to do with Khafre's. Another thing was that Deboreka was a god of hatred, but we just simply didn't know. Pearl Abyss would not tell us. And last year, when the Kharazad was released as a band-aid to the Deboreka issue, the Deboreka issue being that the players had to detour for Deborekas and not work towards the silver incentive, Pearl Abyss responded to that with Kharazad being like, hey, we understood, here it is, there you go. Despite the fact that Kron agenda, it was the better option considering the time. Nowadays, they flooded us with the Deborekas, and the Kharazads are basically only and exclusively a deck level entry. I was really pissed because they would just simply completely bury 5-year worth of mystery and discussion within the community over what or who Deboreka is. And it would be all the way up until the Dania, 5 years, almost and a half after the release of Deboreka in the Cartian quest chain, when we would learn who Deboreka actually is. And of course, that is one of the biggest releases and a Pandora box moment, because Cartian herself mentions that she was called Deboreka of Hexa, which happens roughly 300 or so more years ago. That is a very big issue from a lore perspective, because while we did receive the answers of who Deboreka was, Pearl Abyss's promise to tie the loose ends created 17 more loose ends. The issue from Kharazad gameplay perspective was, first, it robbed you away from the journey, which was the Deborekas, and now it was a silver funding. It was something that just lacked all purpose. One of the beautiful things about Black Desert was going towards those arc of commitment. It would be hard, it would be brutal, it would be rough, you would require preparation, it was a setup, elixirs, all of those things. There was a charm to that. But now the Kharazads are purposeless grinding for capped spots. The environment in which Kharazads exist, although Kharazads can be better, are right now worse compared to the environment which Deboreka existed within. And that's a little bit of a plea to me from Pearl Abysses to recognize that, and they somewhat are. We're seeing Pearl Abyss right now move back, and they're heading back to the old roots, to the old ways. We're returning to Star's End with new details to it. We're returning to Altar of Blood. Data mine hints that the Altar of Blood is not going to be the same. The Altar of Blood will have a new quest chain that will work more towards it. It's not a rework, it's a return to where we left. And that's an important bit. Pearl Abyss are moving towards that. Evidently so, if we to believe the data mines. Now, Cartian herself tells us that she is engulfed in hatred and despair, and she wants this all to end. She wants this all to conclude, although she has this desire for her to live and see the end of it at the very least. Cartian is an extremely depressed individual, sadly, and she is described within her mythos as a walking husk of a woman that is like crippled and cracked all over her entirety. The Deboreka accessory, a mystery resolved which sparked few more mysteries and a little bit of nostalgia from the player base, both on a gameplay level and on a lore level, because the gameplay requests right now the Deboreka arcs, the journeys, the important steps and preparations for them, while the lore itself has so many more questions to be answered. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video. And the question in the beginning, what do you prefer? Deboreka arcs or purposeless Kharazads? Let me hear it down below. I love you guys. Enjoy yourselves. Bye-bye.